In the previous video, we took a look at setting the height and the width of the dashboard. So that meant we had a look at the options that we can pass in to when a viz is loading. Okay, so we can set the height and the width. We had a look at these two callbacks called onFirstInteractive, onFirstSizeKnown. Okay, what I now want to do is I want to show you how you can interact with your Tableau visualization from within your web page. So what we want to do is we want to understand how we can communicate with anything on my web page with the dashboard itself. Okay, so what we can do is let's do the following. We first need to create some elements on our website. So a very common thing to do on a website is to have some buttons on there, and the user can then interact with those buttons. So I'm going to my index file, and what I want to do is just underneath my title, I want to create a button, and I'm gonna call this button, and we actually just put a label on there. Just click here. Okay. If I hit save, we will see that the button now renders. Okay, I can click on it. Nothing happens because we haven't done anything with this. Okay, so let's set that up now. First of all, what we need to do is we need to give it a name, or in this case, just let's give it an ID. So we're giving it an ID, and let's call this an ID of BTN from button. Okay, let's hit save. And that allows us, similar to the ID here, to reference this in our JavaScript. Okay, so what we want to do is let's go to the top here. And what we want to do is, first of all, we want to get access to that button. So let me just go on this line. Doesn't really matter where you put this. And I'm going to say constant btn equals document dot get element by ID. So you can see VS Code auto completes this. So we're going to get element by ID. And we gave this an ID of btn. Okay, so that means that we now can get access to that button. Now, on this button element, there are certain methods and event listeners. So here we saw earlier that we do document.addEventListener. What we now want to do is we want to do btn.addEventListener. So let's add that here. So btn.addAnEventListener. And the event that we want to listen for is a click event, because that's what people do when they click on a button. And what we then want to do is we want to execute some kind of function. So we can do an anonymous function here. So we could do, for example, function. And then we can say, let's close it off. Oh, sorry, with that one. And say console.log hello from my button. Okay, so if I hit save, now this is going to log to the console. So if we open up the console, so let's go to inspect, console. And if I now click here, we can see that besides the things that Tableau logged when we were interacting with the viz, now also every time I click here, you can see it logs this hello from my button. Now, this doesn't do anything with our visualization. So let's take a look at the documentation. So we're going into the Tableau docs again. And what we can do here is we can, for example, get a method here. And we have a method called show, and we have one called hide. So this won't be 100% super relevant. But what we can do is we can say, let's hide or show the viz based on the button. Okay, so I'm just gonna go in here. And what we want to do in this particular function, we can then say viz.hide, because it's a method, we want to execute it. So if we do that, now wait until it loads. And now if we click here, it should hide. It doesn't hide because this is a really good one actually, because the viz is not defined. And that is because the vis variable here is declared within this function. So we can't access it outside of the function. So what we can do to solve that is if we on the top of the document just do let vis, so that basically initializes it but doesn't set it to anything. Then we go down here and we remove let. So we set vis to that one. If we now save it, it still renders. And now if we say click here, it hides the vis because it has access to the vis. Okay. Now, this button hides it. Let's practice a little bit more and let's create another button where we can show the vis. So we can basically copy this thing over and let's call this show btn. And then let's do this click to show. Let's say click to hide, just to practice with that. btn and show btn. So if we now also go into, let's save this, and let's go into JavaScript file, you can now see two buttons show up. One is actually doing something, the other thing isn't. Now we have click to hide on that one, and the show button, let's go on the top, and let's do the following. Let's say constant show btn equals document.get element by ID. And now we want to get the button that corresponds to the one that's in there. Okay, so let's hit save. And now we need to do the same thing in order to listen for it. So in JavaScript, we can also add comments. So let's do and set a comment here. Listen for clicks to hide the vis. And then let's create another one where we're going to say listen for clicks to show the vis. Okay, so that's going to be my show btn dot add an event listener. And now we're going to say on click. So when someone clicks on it, we want to execute a function, and that function is going to say vis dot show. Okay, so now if we hit save again, you can see nothing really changes in this dashboard. But if we get rid of that one, click to hide, now it's hidden, and click to show will show us the dashboard. So that really depends on what you want to do. With click to show and hide, it doesn't actually remove the DOM node from the page. And that's why it doesn't have to reload the visual. Now, if you want to remove this whole if you want to remove the whole visual from the page, you need to use a different method called the dispose. And this is also the way if you want to, for example, replace this vis with another vis, you first need to get rid of it. So you first need to dispose it, and then you need to initialize a new Tableau vis. Okay, so that's another way of doing that with dispose. Okay, now in the next video, what we'll do is we are going to add another button. And for that button, what we're going to do is we're going to use that one to export our dashboard to a PDF.